A full year has passed since we covered this game, and not only has a lot of things happened related with this game, there's just been a lot of things happening in my life, well, everybody in the team, to be perfectly honest, as well as just a lot of elements that I don't think are correct to talk about when it comes to this video alone. But it is something that we will talk about later in the future. When the news about Sonic Frontiers getting title updates came out, I knew I was going to have a good reason to also revisit this game. Have my opinions changed? Do the updates change the overall experience? Well, sort of. Looking back at the video, while I don't necessarily take back anything that I said, there are a few elements where I was more optimistic than I am right now, which is expected from a first playthrough, honeymoon syndrome and all that jazz. But I want to take this video as an opportunity to both readdress some elements from the core game, as well as discussing new points that came from the title updates, both related to them and surprisingly unrelated. Yes, just like last year, we are finishing this year with another and possibly final look at Sonic Frontiers, mostly focusing on what the updates add and amplify to the core game, and of course, look at some of the stuff that I feel are worth discussing within the context of the game. Once again, spoilers to the absolute end, and if you have not seen the original Frontiers video, I heavily suggest you do, since I will be writing the script with the assumption that you have already played the game, or at least watched the original video. But I'll still try to elaborate my thoughts in a way that even a newcomer can enjoy. Just something to keep in mind. This is clearly not as long as the original, but there's still a lot to talk about. So without padding this intro even more, this is the final horizon for Sonic Frontiers.
Please look after Father.
I'm going to go one update at a time for the sake of projecting the experience I felt while playing them. And I want to open up this update with this particular statement. Cut content doesn't automatically mean unfinished game. There's a little bit more to that when it comes to making that definition to a game. The base game had a beginning and an ending, with a content that followed you throughout the entirety of that story. When I think of an unfinished game that's completely through updates, I think of Monster Hunter Rise. I love Monster Hunter Rise, it's one of my favorite games in that series, but you did not actually have a final boss until 2 months after the game release. It literally ends on a cliffhanger, and it ended on a several years long struggle with a friend not playing the ending of the game to this very day. It's just one quest, Greg, you're a goddamn at the goddamn. My point being, Sonic Frontiers, whether you think lacks polish, managed to cover all the boxes of what it was trying to achieve within its base content, leading to a conclusion. It is a finished product. But boy, did this update immediately shows they had more things planned with this game. And I can prove that primarily with the sole existence of the Jukebox update, which basically means that you can play a variety of tracks from the iconic soundtrack of the Sonic series while traveling across the islands. However, you have to collect the tracks scattered around all maps of the game. Now, despite what some might think, this isn't what I mean by saying there's clearly cut content. After all, not every game actually requires to have a music playlist. Mario Odyssey is the only game from top of my head that does that, and it's also a post-game feature. It's when you go to collect them when you start realizing there's more to this game than what it was asked you to do at its base. You will notice this primarily in Island 4, where all you did was to get on top of the towers and didn't really explore the map at all. That said, as you begin to collect the music tracks, you realize that there was actually stuff to explore in this map, but it's just not utilized at all. You see buildings and structures that don't have any purpose outside of now being where you find the music tracks. I know Island 4 is basically a fraction of the first island that you weren't actually allowed to explore, but that's still kind of my point. You didn't have to do anything in these areas, but apparently they had a lot more stuff going on than what you would consider, since you didn't have a reason to even think of exploring this part of the game. Hell, there's this entire section in the island that is covered in water. Let me be clear, in the base game, not only you don't have any business coming to this place whatsoever, there's not a single underwater challenge to begin with. Sure, you can kill yourself in the little areas of water if you're just bored, but up until this point, and only this section, you don't really have to do anything, or there's no real challenge that involves going through water and keeping attention on your oxygen, to the point where you cannot help but question, was there something planned for this area? Were we supposed to do more here? Why isn't more of this? Why do we have areas like this when we didn't visit them during the main campaign? You end up getting this actual feeling that there was more to the game than what we originally got. And also, God, I still think this game looks beautiful during sunset and sunrise. And seeing this massive landscapes whenever you travel, it just makes me feel with energy and ready to run across all of it, to the point of ignoring the fact that I could have gotten this one note at the beginning, but decided to ignore it all the way until the end. But that's just the first half of what Title Update 1 brings to the table, since you also got a couple of features that are in the form of time trial mode. I actually covered these challenges in the channel, doing S-rank of all 4 islands, as well as getting the Monster Hunter collaboration suit for Sonic and the Rathalos armor, but that's not the most impressive part about it. By visiting Big, you get a cooking barbecue feature, which is something you can always do in Monster Hunter, but here, when you do well done sticks, you get free tokens. You can just grind these tokens and build Sonic up to level 99 at the very beginning of the game because of this feature. Remember, these tokens can be traded for seeds and cocoa that can be traded for higher rank count, increase of speed, attack, and defense, and they're not that expensive, which makes the fishing bit nothing more than a completion thing to do, since you can just keep making meat for grinding, with the only balancing bit that the earlier islands give you less tokens by default. I don't think this is a bad thing, you can just have self-control and not abuse it, it's just another method of grinding for you to rely on. But it's clearly a feature that brings a lot of benefit to the player. Meanwhile, the time trials, they're fine. I'll start with something I didn't know. Apparently there's this boss I didn't encounter in my original run called Ghost, which you can only hurt through these statues located in a platforming section dedicated to this particular mini-boss. I really loved it despite being conflicted about this mode. It's all about what the game was trying to set up with these fights. By having the pressure of reaching the highest score, which can actually take you a few tries to do them, you end up spamming the specific movesets that give you the best damage, rather than pulling out combos that feel organic to do. Which sounds like a complete no shit thing to say, it's a time trial after all, you're playing with a different mindset, but I don't know, you end up having to do this which I don't think it has the same level of excitement as doing this. However, reaching that S rank definitely felt good, and it also helped me learn what techniques are more beneficial and effective to rely on. And another important thing for me, it also allowed me to do something I couldn't do in the original run. Get a perfectly synchronized music sequence during the Wyvern fight, highlighting the epicness of the fight. I feel complete. Also, yeah, fuck anime. I really don't have much to say about this particular update because it wasn't really all that different. It was a good first update. It was nice to go back and explore the game's levels. It just felt nice to have more things to do in the game. But everyone kinda knew that this was just a taste of what was to come. So why don't we just move on into update 2. This one was where people were really excited because it kinda kept things vague. The only thing we knew about update 2 is that there would be a certain focus on Sonic's birthday, open zone challenges, and new Coco, which could have basically meant anything, so there was enough speculation. And what we got was actually really cool, although to be honest, this screen filter you can put kinda shitty for my liking. I'm still using it during this update. It's Sonic's birthday. God knows he deserves some happiness after a while. But the main thing with this update was to fill the levels with even more content and challenges for you to try and unlock even more extra goodies for Sonic. The main two being extra wheels of boost energy and the spin dash, which you can obtain through two major challenges. The boost energy is unlocked by obtaining all the Coco from the main islands, and look, I love having basically more stamina wheels, but the thing that truly surprised me were the platforming challenges to get the Coco in the first place. I really felt like I was being tested to react quickly and be familiar with the way Sonic controls in order to get the best results. Not to mention the overall charm in which the challenges were designed and assets adapted into a birthday theme. It was really nice and most importantly, fun. Sure, I can argue that the challenges highlight how disconnected the platforming feels from the exploration of the islands, but that really didn't rob me from enjoying the experience at all, because now I feel the entire island box of the level is being utilized to full effect. You can have entire platforming sections that take place in the middle of the ocean, allowing you to see the massive landscape that you have explored already to your heart's content, but also experiment with the platforming challenges in a way that puts your abilities to the test. Neat. The main thing I started to notice after 30 minutes of playing this update, which by the way can contain around 2 to 3 hours worth of gameplay, most of the Coco challenges were completely in 3D. In terms of 2D challenges, there's like one per island that involves going around a giant cylinder, there's one in Ares Island, but other than that, everything else is focused on being 3D high-speed platforming. Yeah, I didn't encounter that much 2D in Chaos Islands, which overused that. Not all of the challenges are winners though. This climbing challenge can be pretty frustrating to navigate for all I care. And of course, the giant box maze. It took me around 25 minutes to finish this section. Oh yeah, don't worry, I meant to do that. This maze basically asks you to collect all the balls of 10 rings in a section in order to unlock the switch that leads to the next one. And in order to go from one area to another, you have to launch yourself into these ramps around the maze, which is quite creative. Main issue is the precision of the platforming. The boxes are too small for Sonic's movement, and consider the boxes have spike walls in some of them, there's a lot of moments like what you just witnessed. This section would have been impossible if it wasn't for the fact that I can just adjust Sonic's movement on the fly in the menus. I'm going to elaborate on this a little since I know people have mixed feelings about this, but in general, sliders for movement are a good thing and just as much of a valid alternative as just having one control scheme. It's up for the developers to make sure the level design can still be challenging and fun while having to consider the possible movement they allow players to have. People consider this a limitation since now the levels need to be designed with every possible adjustment the player might have, instead of having one set of movement that can be taken to its maximum potential with platforming challenges. An argument that has a very solid ground of consideration, but this DLC shows that you can still achieve that level of potential within a more customizable movement. If I felt I was too floaty, or that my movement needed more precise jumps, I can just turn down the acceleration and speed, make sure that I don't have a top speed at the beginning, better steering, how much momentum do I want to lose during my jumps. I eventually ended up having a movement that made me feel like I was in complete control for any challenge later on. I will admit that the process of reaching that personal balance definitely breaks the pacing, since you run the risk of having to pause the game and start playing within the settings over and over, possibly doing it only for a specific scenario and having to readjust it once you're done with that section. But again, it's a method that allows players to adapt to a situation and eventually hit their own sweet spot on how Sonic should move for them. Also, in Update 2, they now give you the option to just drop all the Cocos into one stat with just one press, no longer needing to do one level at a time. And if I could bring one major complaint with this update, is how it applies the birthday theme on everything, including the already established level design for the base game, making exploration just a little tricky since now everything is under the same skin. It wasn't a common occurrence, but there will be times where I'm near a Coco challenge and then it turns out I did a challenge from the original island that's just blending with the actual DLC. I just think we could have had the birthday content being exclusive to that theme so we could tell everything apart. But again, very minor complaint, I managed to do it anyway. Overall, I was genuinely excited to tackle these platforming challenges because they really felt like an evolution of the platforming we were getting in the base game. I feel challenged, I feel exhilarated, I'm having fun applying my skills to get the special Coco. Then there's the time challenges. You basically have to collect orbs and perform combos in order to reach a high score. Getting S rank on all of them gives you access to the spin dash, which basically works in its own weird world where you can use it as a power-up drop dash or an even more powerful boost. And it's so exciting to blast off into the air when jumping off a cliff just right, or even get an immediate jump. I'd see myself using it just as often as the regular boost. There's just something about the way the spin dash interacts with the terrain that brings its own approach to when you use the boost, making it its own skill for you to use for the sake of having a different yet unlockable option. Overall, while definitely having moments where I felt I had to negotiate with the game in order to get the best out of this update, the rewards really felt worth the time invested, and the challenges really helped me get familiar with all the tools at my disposal, which I knew I was going to need for the final update that was going to have a new story and characters. And if this was the challenge prior to it, then I had to be ready to go all out.
I am inevitable. I cannot be denied. No matter what form I take, the end comes for you all.
Stood a chance against Sonic. Now, against all four of us.
Sonic handled 4 islands in this mess. I'm not going down to just one. Looks like I'm going all out after all. Sonic, it's now or never.
So let's be real a little bit. This is the big one. This is the big title update, almost to the point of calling it an expansion. And I want to focus on that little bit of acknowledgement because Title Update 3 in and of itself can consist of basically 4 to 6 hours long depending on how much you cover and how much does it take you to tackle the game's challenge. That on its own is definitely worth commending since all of the updates were simply made for the sake of both polishing and adding ideas to the already established game. And regardless of how we feel about the quality of each and every update, that amount of content as a token of appreciation for Frontiers becoming a success is truly worth acknowledging. But with that said, if I could summarize this experience as a whole before we begin, I'd say that Final Horizon, more than improving or expanding, it amplifies the Frontiers experience. What do I mean? Well, let's get into it, shall we? First off, this update is somewhat presented as an alternate ending. You can only access to this as an alternate scenario with its own save file of the game, and its own version of what you can encounter in Oranos Island, the final area of the game. In terms of plot, this takes place right after Sonic and Eggman join forces at the end of Island 4, where we activate the towers to release the end. Only this time, Sage suggests that we make a slight reverse on the sacrifice made by Tails, Amy, and Knuckles, so everyone can multitask on not only getting the Chaos Emeralds, but also figuring a way in which Sonic can utilize the corruption of cyberspace to his benefit. This is definitely a positive on my end, simply because, if you recall some of the trailers before the game came out, they were playing the aspect of Sonic's corruption like a major plot element, but the original story only highlighted that Sonic was getting tired and nothing more. That whole plot thread didn't mean anything until now. So because of this, now Tails, Amy and Knuckles have to travel across the island, explore the environment to unlock new areas as well as finding the Chaos Emeralds, while Sonic has to face several challenges made by the actual Coco forms of the Titans.
The very Titans you destroyed.
Hey, I asked you to explain things from the beginning, remember?
That is irrelevant now.
In a certain way, this entire area brings a more condensed and more elaborated version of what the base game was already offering. When you think about it, almost everything that you were doing in all 5 areas of the game are implemented into this one update, and with the added bonus of the new gameplay styles. And since those are the main highlight here, let's focus on that for a few minutes. Let's start with Amy, who, not gonna lie, really surprised me with how much fun I had playing as her. She basically has a little bit of everyone. She can run just as fast as Sonic, she can glide like Knuckles, but has enough attributes that allow her to basically fly like Tails. And let me tell you, mixing her abilities in a way that allows me to go from one extreme of the island to the next feels incredibly satisfying. Her only main problem is that combat-wise, she is incredibly slow, and based on what I played, she doesn't manage to get enough long-distance attacks to compensate the speed of her combat. And on top of that, holy shit, the enemies in this game do not mess around. Come on. Alright, here we go. We can do this. I can do this. I got this. No! That took me forever and I was still far from hitting it. I fucking love this. Yeah, I'll be the first to admit that I don't really mind having these level of challenge for the mini bosses. Not only you don't actually need to fight them like at all in order to beat the game, since you can keep collecting gears and keys by doing the basic exploration, meaning you don't have to fight them at all. I feel like these are just fat for people to keep on playing or to have something to do as post-game content. Then there's Knuckles. Okay, I have to ask, what's with Knuckles always being the one that any game seems to have a problem with? Here's the main thing for me. Knuckles' glide control are way too heavy, and it moves too fast for the control to properly catch up. Just look at this. My goal is to get to the spring on top of the pillars. But look at the amount of shit I have to go through because the control doesn't allow me to just turn around accurately. By the time I'm barely starting to turn right or left, I'm already far away from where I was trying to go, to the point where it's better to just get into a higher area and try to go straight towards my goal and avoid having to move. And to make matters worse, wall climbing is just... I don't even know how to properly describe it, but the problem comes into how the movement of the control depends on the camera angle, not your actual position. Which doesn't sound like a problem, but with the level design that you're going to be facing, you'd be surprised by the amount of times where I just felt like I was not controlling the game. The game was controlling the situation, and the game decided whether I deserve to have a fun time. Not to mention that Knuckles has some really sensitive collision detection, because as soon as you breathe at a ledge that's not colored for climbing or running, he just gives up and starts falling. And since he changes position, now I'm just having an anxiety attack for how the control is going to react to my commands. Mother! Also, this is highlighted with Knuckles, yet it's relevant to the whole game. Why can I only use the parkour system in only the specific surfaces of terrain? And thus, why can't I just climb on anything as Knuckles? That's his whole point, yet now he basically needs a special world for this. His literal name reflects that factor, yet apparently a goddamn human can do this with his bare hands. Okay, let's talk about this little delay. Now, to be fair, every single character has some form of charge animation with their moveset. Like Amy needs to have her animation for her Tarot motorcycle, which to be honest is so stupid, I love it. But it means I cannot change into her gliding until the animation is fully done. Here, the gliding only begins after this little charge move, which then makes him go from 1-0 to 100. The problem once again is that this animation is only for the sake of charging up the movement. It doesn't help with positioning where do you want Knuckles to go before the glide. At best, you can cancel it in case you feel like it's not even worth trying. But then Knuckles just falls, and considering his platforming section can be in the middle of the air, it only makes playing with him much more frustrating. Now, I can definitely customize his movements in this setting, but these only help so much when the speed, which you can also manipulate, doesn't actually match the movement. He's just too stiff when gliding, so I don't have enough control over where do I want to go, or even how do I see myself getting there. And that seriously kills off any interest I can have when using him in the first place, because I don't mind the ideas of giving Knuckles all these things. I just wish the mechanics and control scheme were in a more balanced harmony altogether. Either make the movement able to catch up with the speed, or make the movement much more reactive to the speed. As for the rest of his skills, well, I don't have anything to say. It's because of how his most basic movement feels to play. I didn't even want to bother upgrading him. Even if his skill set is genuinely good, if its core doesn't work, I don't want to bother. Knuckles needs to be improved in order for me to have any feedback beyond that. Otherwise, I just don't care. Which sounds bad for this kind of video, but I think the fact that I didn't feel like looking deeply into what the character can do because of his core gameplay not working at all is a big problem in and of itself. Main problem with all three characters is that almost every move has some type of gimmick for the sake of it. For instance, they have a special side loop ability that they can trigger with enough side loop energy. Like Amy uses her hammer to make a ground pound side loop, Tails launches a projectile, and Knuckles just hits the ground really hard. An interesting change that I found with Knuckles is that the Starfall event is no longer based on slot machines or even coins for Big Fishy minigame. Instead, you just collect cocoa and seeds for your stats, allowing you to reach level 99 on all characters much faster than before. I wish this was me being bad on purpose. At least that way I can apply for a job in IGN. And I will admit that the challenges for Knuckles are very well designed. I just wish I could feel like I'm allowed to play them instead of having to feel like I'm negotiating with the game whether can I play or not. Oh, for the love of God! Finally, we have Tails, which, if I had one major criticism, is that he did not have any form of offensive movement at the beginning. While Amy and Knuckles could use the homing attack from the start, Tails needs an upgrade in the skill tree which allows him to throw tools at things and destroy them. This is still very effective, but I get why someone will question why Tails is the only one who didn't get the homing attack and everyone else did. But that's basically as far as criticism with Tails goes if you ask me. Because exploring with Tails, especially when you get his special boost, which is just making the tornado appear so he can skyrocket into the entire island, is very exhilarating, and I genuinely felt like I was controlling a character able to fly with very little limitation. But just as a quick tangent, this area was a pain in the ass and it always felt annoying to having to be incredibly careful with making contact with the boost panels. And after spending 3 minutes here, what do we get? I'm not angry, but this is the kind of stuff that turns people into serial killers. And to give the Tools combat a little bit of credit, it makes Tails have his own identity when getting into combat. It gives the game a chance to stop shoot 'em up type of combat that was genuinely fun. His entire movement feels in complete and perfect control because of how broken he is. Which gamers need to remember the fun of having broken characters, especially in a single player game. It was just a chance for me to enjoy exploration with the Yellow Fox. But once you do enough exploration with all three, it's time to go back to our Blue Blur who has more towers to climb up, and each with their own platforming challenges and trials to overcome. And I'm going to bring a small theory of mine that requires me to kind of skip ahead a little. Due to interviews with the director of the game, Morio Kishimoto, we have been told that the last parts of the game, among them the final island and the boss fight with the end, were rushed due to lack of time after dealing with a lot of trial and error during development. And that final boss can only be obtained by playing hard mode in the base content of the game. While I'm pretty sure the different gameplay styles were legitimately added bonuses, I cannot help but think that trials specifically, not so much the towers, as well as the final fight, were not only the original intent of the game's design, they were meant to be content locked behind hard mode specifically. This is mostly just perspective, so if you disagree, I totally get it. But I think the entirety of Final Horizon was considered a point of no return for people who will play the game on hard mode, and after the first hours, everything was its own extra content. Meaning that maybe if you didn't beat the game on hard mode, you get the ending in which Sage helps Sonic and then sacrifices at the end of the game, getting the post-credit scene of her surviving through cyberspace. But if you play the game on hard mode, the entirety of the last island will change into something similar to what this update offers. At the end, it's all hypothesis, and it requires assuming what parts of this game were originally planned and which ones were legit bonus ideas after getting feedback from fans. But I think that idea makes sense, since not only it is weird that the only difference between difficulties in the base game was the final boss, but also because Final Horizon will actually test you. I should also elaborate that unlike the base game, which adds to my theory a little, you don't need to play in any specific difficulty. No matter what mode you play, you will get the exact same amount of content, with easy mode actually adding a few assets to support your traveling through the towers, so you don't have to be extremely precise with your platforming, since, unlike the original towers, there's no checkpoints. It's all or nothing with these. You will not get any kind of zip line for you to get back up into a specific section, but especially on easy mode is actually quite manageable. I managed to get to the top of every tower on my first try on this difficulty, and I didn't try to go any higher because in this update, they're just bragging rights. There's no point. You have nothing to prove. Why am I elaborating so much on this point? Because apparently now Sonic is too fucking hard, which I just don't understand how this game became a subject of the same discussion you will get on a front sub game. It's really not that hard, let alone on easy mode. Now, for the sake of the argument, I am willing to set a difference between the concept of difficulty and difficulty spike. Whether or not Update 3 is actually difficult, it's definitely a shift in challenge with what was given throughout the entire game. Except also not really, because the challenge is not that different from what we were getting in the other updates, and the only punishment you get is to get back up and try again. Like, I understand that there is a certain difference in difficulty with how the rest of the game played out up until this point, and hell, I might even argue that this update alone is just as challenging as Eggman Land and the entirety of Sonic Lost World 3DS, which offers some of the most challenging moments in the entire franchise. But this game offers you way more than enough tools in order to really adjust yourself and make the best out of the experience, as well as not needing to get too hard on yourself. That's not to say the game doesn't have its bullshit moments, and that comes in the form of the Titan Trials, where you're basically set on different types of fights, but not only is your skill set restricted, your stats get altered all the way back to level 1 for rings and stats, which makes some segments incredibly stressful because they also added more to the enemies. Wyvern's Trial was the biggest low point for me, because the enemies get a stat bonus of immediate reset on the position of their shield, meaning you can only hit them so many times before doing the side loop again. And considering you're also on a time trial, meaning that you need to be fast on dealing as much damage as possible while dealing with a situation that was never in any side of the game up until this point. This was the lowest point of the update for me, which means that yeah, I did not think the final trial was a bad challenge, and I can say for sure that people are overblowing how difficult it is even on easy mode, which only makes discussing this kind of stuff with folks online a very frustrating experience. Let's start with what I consider to be the actual problem with the Master Coco trial. You're doing a level 1 boss rush of all 3 titans with no chance of getting any extra rings, and on top of that, the game implements a perfect parry system both on this run and the final boss. And I get why this is a problem with people. Imagine if you did the Master Soul trials in Breath of the Wild, but they also took all your heart containers. I get it can be too much to ask, but I genuinely think most of the problems people have with the overall challenge of the game comes from people who either didn't put some time adjusting the movement settings in a way that felt comfortable for them, or wanted the game to be easier without, toggling the goddamn option that says the game on easy mode. You have the options that people beg FromSoft to put. Let's talk about the biggest myth. The perfect parry is too accurate and the game was not designed with it in mind. First of all, and unfortunately you have to take my word for it, so if you don't believe me, that's fine. This is something people were mocking the game for. The parry in the rest of the game is permanent. You can just hold it, which will make a lot of fights a complete joke once you realize this. Second, no, it's not too accurate, at least not on easy mode. And the only reason why I use this mode as a highlight to debunk the whole argument is because the way some people express themselves about the challenge makes it sound like even easy mode was too much, when it's really not. If you want to discuss the challenge on any other difficulty, that's fair, I cannot confirm nor deny that. But the game itself is not impossible to beat, nor asking too much to a player of any level. You have an interval of 2 to 3 seconds of perfect parry on easy mode, and the moment the animation triggers, you're already in a position where you will be able to counter the attack from the boss. I hate to say it, but even if it's harder than before, objectively speaking, it's not impossible nor asking you for too much. Easy mode definitely makes this far more manageable, and there's no reason to play higher difficulties outside of bragging rights, which at that point, that's a you problem! Trying to blame the game for not being something you can overcome easily, while there's an argument to be had about how harder it gets from base game to this point, not only do I think it's ignorant since you have more than enough ways to make the experience easier, it's overall entitled. You can discuss difficulty in gaming all you want, but no matter how many options you get, there will always be a point where you have to accept that in a video game, you have to beat World War 1 in order to see World War 2 and onward. And asking for the game to consider those who just want to digest the story, it only comes off as spoil talk, since by that point, why not just go on fucking YouTube and consume your story in a video game without putting the effort of playing the video game? And honestly, since this game does give you ways to enjoy its content in a casual manner, that's just maidenless talk.
You are maidenless.
That's it, and being very personal about this, I do not like the way they handle the difficulty for Final Horizon by principle, simply because I do not like when a game's concept of increasing the challenge is to cripple the player. If they wanted to implement perfect parry, fine, go for it, but don't alter how much time of animation you have based on your difficulty. Yeah, that's apparently a thing, where if you are playing on easy mode, you get 3 seconds of animation, from my understanding. The higher the difficulty you get, as far as I'm concerned, the less animation you get, to the point where allegedly the animation is barely existing on hard mode. And I never like when games do that, because it feels like a cheap method of extra challenge. Instead of going into something like Monster Hunter, where the higher difficulty means both higher damage but also a more challenging AI, no, instead let's make your gameplay more limited. That's something I don't find fun, because I'm not being challenged, I'm being handicapped. And yeah, because of that, fuck this game too. I love it, but still, that's never a fun time for me. I can cut some slack since this isn't an expansion like Monster Hunter does. Like, this is a free update after all. And I can even give a pass on the mini bosses because they're as optional as my sex life apparently, but I really hope they stick to either one difficulty or add more challenge with the difficulty instead of reducing your skills later on. But yeah, going back to this fight a little bit, yeah, it was a little rough and it really sucks to spend 15 to 20 minutes in a trial and end up having to go back at the beginning of the Giganto fight. But because of the amount of holding time you get from the parry, it only took me about 1 hour to clear the trial, and mostly was due to me making a bit too many mistakes on the fight with Knight. But once I got to learn what attacks to exploit, having an understanding of the timing for parrying, and even using some of the side loop special attacks, I managed to finish this trial with over 50 rings to spare. It can be a little frustrating, but personally speaking, it felt so good to beat all of them and conquering the challenge, and I can promise those who stop at this point that you can do it too. And before we jump into the big finale, I want to talk about something that I could not experience too much myself for the time of this video, and that was the cyber stages. And yet they are back for this update. In order to get access to each tower, you need to collect a certain amount of lookout cocoa, special cocoa that activate the towers for Sonic to jump into. You can find enough of these by just exploring the island, but you can also try getting them within cyberspace. And all of them apply a new idea with these challenges that wasn't in the base game. You're not gonna do them all in one sitting. Yup, they all have 1 or 2 missions that can only be obtained in a dedicated run. Some require you to help some animals getting in the level, others require you to explore the levels to find moon rings, fuck this game, or just any kind of collectible from previous games, as well as finding a hidden end goal. And each level has a specific gimmick, like a super boost, a speed meter that treats Sonic speed like a car that can overheat, a highway type of level that keeps on a straight line unless you change your course, one with major focus on verticality, a time trial where you need to beat the level in under a minute, racing a Shadow Tails on top of getting an S rank in the first place, a level that hides the challenges behind boxes so you need to react fast to what's up ahead, and an anti-gravity level that, just look at this! The amount of possibilities you can achieve once you get familiar with the level design in Sonic's Control is insane! And look, I know this is not what a lot of people love to envision when it comes to Sonic's movement. They prefer something a little more grounded like the adventure game. But with these cyber stages and the execution of the towers and level placement during the birthday event, I am confident to say that this game manages to accomplish to a certain degree what it was trying to be in terms of gameplay, a hybrid between the adventure formula and the boost formula. I understand there's some elitist people who love to mock the idea, and I understand just by playing that both formulas have their own quirks that get contradicted from one another. And while I can easily dive into this discussion a little bit deeper later down the line, I'm just going to say that I'm completely okay with this approach as long as it remains into a 3D plane. Every single cyber stage, as well as everything in the new version of the island, is completely done in 3D, with the only change being for some shooting sections with Tails. But everything else is done in full 3D, and it's absolutely exhilarating to blast through the island and levels and decide where to land as you're falling. It really brings enjoyment on the platforming and exploration. This is by no means a replacement for the adventure type of movement, nor would I want to see this movement be the method for an adventure type of game. I completely agree that the philosophies in which these two games work are too different to really fuse together without making sacrifices. But this update does exactly what I wanted after Frontiers, to embrace the vision and improve the experience. Whether you like a momentum-based gameplay that's more grounded than the adventure games, or even something that's more linear like Colors and Generations, the reality here is that Frontiers operates in a way that's different enough to be its own beast compared to these two. And I think trying to force it to become more aligned to any of those alters the vision in a way that changes the experience rather than actually improve it. There's clearly elements of those formulas inside the game's DNA, but the way it all comes together provides an experience that's different yet familiar, and more importantly, true to one of the core elements of Sonic, being a high-speed platformer. That's not to say I consider this idea as flawless. Helping the flickies feels a little too finicky for my liking when interacting with the terrain, and unless we plan on using Cyber Stage as this foundation's equivalent to special stages in a 3D game, some of the gimmicks will be a little hard to really blend organically into the open areas, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't enjoying myself on every single level. I want to keep improving, I want to master the game's mechanics, I want to test myself with some of the challenges I left behind, I want to play again, which is the best kind of rating a person can give to a platformer of this kind, and to a degree, the main goal that has always been present since the very beginning, for the game to click with the player in a way that makes them want to keep playing. As I mentioned at the beginning, I don't think this update manages to improve on the overall experience, but rather amplify it. Because in my original video, I stated that this game was capable of giving you amazing moments for you to enjoy throughout the entire game, but also moments where it's really infuriating. The same can be said about this update, but even stronger, because there's plenty of things that I genuinely did not like about this update, and most of them are just by principle. Knuckles' movement, the difficulty through crippling the player, and how strict the game can be with some of the trials by taking away every single thing you earn from the grinding, making reaching level 99 completely pointless outside of side game content. But the stuff I did, I enjoyed them more than any of the stuff I have enjoyed since I first played Sonic Adventure on the GameCube and Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, making me a fan for almost 20 years by this point. And that includes the final boss of this game. The main goal in the story is that while Tails, Amy, Knuckles, and Eggman are looking for the Chaos Emeralds, Sonic has to go through the trials in each tower in order to get the blessing of the Coco in order to make his body compatible with the energy of cyberspace in order to increase his power to defeat the End, which allows us to give closure to each Titan as well as the leader of the tribe, the Master King. They go a little bit more in depth about how each Titan really was a reflection of the cast back then, while also establishing that Sonic has a little bit of every Titan, which makes him possibly more special than those who came before, and how he's much more resistant to cyberspace than we thought. And I personally always prefer this perception of Sonic. He is the embodiment of freedom and will always do everything he can to prevent people from having their lives being controlled or taken over by someone else so they can enjoy their lives to the fullest. To the point where I always think he's more of an ideal type of character rather than a relatable one. But again, to each their own. This isn't a video to really talk about that sort of thing, so let's move on. After completing the trials, Sonic's given a power that while increasing his strength, he cannot really let loose as it was meant for the Coco rather than, well, a less liquid body, to put it lightly. So he needs to be careful on going all out, and with that, it's time to fight Supreme and the End. This time for good. The first fight is practically the same boring and anticlimactic fight that we had before, but the second one...
This shell was once my prison. Now it shall be the avatar of my return. All shall perish. All shall return to order. To oblivion.
This thing is disturbing with its movements and contortions, and the setting going into a purple and dark environment really sets the tone of impending doom if we don't take this thing down quickly, which Sonic has definitely prepared for. And just on this note, based on how the story develops, this is not Super Sonic 2. Please do your research. This is Kaioken Super Sonic.
What the?
And the music for this fight, nothing against the original composition, but this take on I'm Here really highlights the weight and excitement of the message of the song, which I at least interpreted as the weight and excitement of preparing yourself for the upcoming future that's definitely worth fighting for. The quick time events really managed to reach Cyber Connect 2 levels of excitement and epicness. We get a small challenge of having to defeat the End before it manages to take down our friends, who are Guardian Eggman, as he prepares Supreme's own weapon in order to take down this creature of destruction. Everything about this fight feels perfect, and I was having nothing but excitement in every single second of it. The biggest showcase that this update was not fully planned out is this little gimmick in which the End is constantly healing the Titan until you remove it from its body, which you do by aiming at the tube instead of the head or body. Sounds simple, right? Well, here's a simple thing. You cannot actually change the aiming radical at will. It's always been kind of a random and based on nothing but what's the closest to being in front of your character. In this case, it's always the body. So how do you actually change where to aim? By pressing the bumpers and dodging until the radical decides you're good to go. What the fuck? It was easier to do that rather than just give you a command that allows you to choose where to attack. I spent over 20 minutes doing this stupid thing because I could not for the life of me figure out how to change the radical at will, or even checking if I needed to do something in particular. Or hell, maybe it's just an endurance thing and after a certain point, the game will just let me do it. Turns out, no, just dodge the air and suddenly it changes direction. Not realizing this thing that I personally considered a misstep from the developers genuinely annoyed the fuck out of me and killed off the epicness of the ending. Until I kept playing and started getting rid of the two-pet wheel. So it's only a massive annoyance until you know how to handle it. I'm still calling it a mistake though. And once we punch this thing into the sky, we get one of the best finales in the series, and everything just clicked.
Sorry, Master King. Looks like I'm going all out after all.
I just gotta do what I've gotta do. That's all.
What you see is what you get. Just a guy that loves adventure. I'm Sonic the Hedgehog. You actually thought you could defeat me by transforming into a monster?
The present day, the here and now that you've stolen, time to take it back. Do I need a reason to want to help out a friend?
Your mask can't hide how sad and lonely you are. That Phantom Ruby virtual reality of yours is the real illusion.
You were so close to being free again. And you gave it all up for me. I don't care how many islands or titans it takes. I'm getting them back this time.
When this is over, I want to share that love with Mo. Even though it may take us far.
I'll admit, you envy your lifestyle. Freedom to go where you want, when you want.
So do it. Get out there and live a little. It takes some getting used to, but here's to you reaching new heights, partner.
And as a final surprise from the game, what once was a music used for a bittersweet moment that ends on the sacrifice one has to do for their loved ones, now becomes the song to celebrate the birth of a new tomorrow and a new family as well.
You did well, Sage. It's time to head home, dear daughter.
Home. I like the sound of that, Father.
Now I'm not alone, a family of my own. I get to go home with you.
As I have said before, the updates in a general sense amplify the experience of Sonic Frontiers more than I can say it improves it. As I have highlighted with the experience, the game hasn't really changed in a way that I can say that if you didn't really like the game the first time you play it, it will not change your mind. In fact, it might actually make your negative feelings even stronger than before. But because of that, I can also say that those who got into the game before will definitely fall in love with it even more. And those who were more in the middle or maybe even curious about the game, I still recommend you to play it, not only because that way you can form your own opinion like a goddamn human being, but because there are things to enjoy in this game, and now even more than before. But in conclusion, what do I think? I mean, first of all, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear enough with over 3 hours worth of commentary and footage about this, but my feelings for this game are basically the same as before, but now even stronger. I can love this game until it becomes the most annoying thing in existence. Knuckles controls, the crippling style of difficulty, the difficulty spike in and of itself, the pacing of the trials, the poor implementation of the targeting system, the random minigames, the pinball, how the game doesn't decide if being open or linear with its exploration. There's just a lot of things that I did not like about this game, primarily with how unpolished those elements were, which I know it's a tiresome word to use, but it's true. All of these things are not necessarily bad, they just need to improve. Not change, improve. There's an important difference, since I don't want these concepts to be tossed, just make better versions of them. But also, the stuff I did enjoy, I think I liked them even more than some of the stuff from Generations, Unleashed, and Sonic Adventure, the games that define my love for the series throughout my experience with the franchise. And after revisiting this game for this video on the updates, and trying out the new content, I can easily put Frontiers among my favorite Sonic games of all time. I'm still going to prefer Adventure 2 and Generations. Those are just games that I can pick up and play even for 5 minutes at a random time and enjoy myself to the fullest. But much like those two games, I see myself coming back to this game yet again in a very near future. Because here's the thing, this is just what I've been able to cover in time for this video, celebrating a year since it came out. There's still all the new mini-bosses for this update, the time attack for the cyberspace stages, clearing out the new map, completing all the collectibles in the game, or even trying extreme mode, which is basically the game with a one-hit kill system, which means I will not touch that even if I got paid. Subscribe, by the way. But the point is, I want to keep on playing and play this game again. My major and probably only feedback that I want from this game moving forward is practically the same I have said since last year. Embrace the journey and evolve the experience. This is a good game. Whether it should or could be better, comparisons, 7 out of 10, that doesn't matter to me. Because what we have here works. It's good. This is a good game. So let's turn this good game into something great. And in a lot of ways, the updates are showcasing how this can become great, if not amazing. But it needs to evolve. Not change directions, not focus on something else, and certainly not trying to keep getting feedback in an effort to please everyone. Just make the best version of the Sonic Frontiers experience. And I guarantee it, everything will eventually come into place throughout evolution. And it's kind of poetic for me to look back at the amount of stuff that has happened and how things have evolved around here since the last time I visited this game, which only makes me more excited about the future. And I can only say, for those who want to see this future with me, thanks for listening.
You'll hardly recognize me when we see each other again.
I wonder if cream and sticks are free. Make a road trip out of it.
It'll be good to get back to my island. At least for a while. We're wasting daylight. Let's go!